Hello and welcome to today's episode. Let's start with the first story. I hope the mic is working okay. There were a lot of issues before recording. So let's get started with the first story. Ukraine is getting cluster bombs instead of NATO membership. Ukraine will get cluster munitions. President Biden told CNN they've run out of ammo. This is a painful lesson for NATO. If they are to go up against a major power like Russia or China, they need quantity. NATO has quality, but not quantity. The West hasn't needed quantity possibly since the Second World War. The NATO, headed by USA, has become like a naval power. Quantity is usually a weakness of naval powers. On land, quantity on land is a weakness of naval powers. That's why Britain ran away from Europe during Second World War. And without a huge land power like USSR, Hitler probably would have won the Second World War. Because Europeans have been slacking with their defense, NATO is highly reliant on USA, a naval power. If NATO learns lessons from this war, it is to increase their quantity and become a land power. Mostly the Europeans. The Europeans will have to do the heavy lifting of becoming like a land power. Of course, most of the weapons production at some level relies on China, and China wouldn't help them to produce weapons to fight a war against China. What Ukraine is not getting is NATO membership. The reason is the current war. NATO cannot give membership to a country in a war or a border dispute. So all Russia has to do is not negotiate and continue the border dispute. NATO has basically admitted that it is scared of Russia and doesn't want to go to war. Whatever your propaganda narrative tells you, for your Western audience, Western media, whatever your propaganda tells you, the truth is Russia is winning and NATO is not in a position to go to war against Russia. The politicians, they want to be like Churchillian and they want to go to war and America is a superpower, yeah. But if you take a look at logistics, then you'll realize NATO is in a terrible position right now. Just a minute. Good. So NATO is in a terrible position right now. It cannot go to war against Russia. If it does, it will lose. So Ukraine is becoming latest Vietnam and Afghanistan. Zelensky must keep fighting like his Western masters want. President Biden told his Ukrainian counterpart during the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, "We are not going anywhere, you're stuck with us." He also called Zelensky Vladimir instead of Volodymyr. Americans and British also told Ukrainians to be grateful. Ukrainians want their help. Americans and British last year told them to keep fighting and not negotiate. Now Ukrainians want their help. Americans and British are like, be grateful. President Zelensky has no choice but to escape from Kiev when Russians arrive, just like US withdrawal from Saigon, Vietnam or Kabul, Afghanistan, if he continues on his current path. Another route is for Zelensky to call President Putin and surrender. In any case, President Zelensky is now in incredibly tough and dangerous situation. There's a good chance that United States does not have weapon supplies to fight a war in Mexico on their border. If a civil war breaks out in Mexico between the Mexican government and Mexican cartels. Next, Threads could become Google+. Meta launched Threads, its Twitter clone based on Instagram. It looks like Instagram stole Twitter's sperm without consent and impregnated itself. Here's why it won't succeed. Instagram is about hot people and Twitter is about smart people. Most celebrities have social media managers, but those who don't have expressed their opinions. Trust me, you don't want to hear their opinions. Most popular person on Twitter is Elon Musk. Most popular person on Instagram is Kim Kardashian. I think it's Kim Kardashian. Maybe it's, I don't know, Messi or Ronaldo. While some people may want to see Elon Musk's ass, most people are not interested in Kim Kardashian's opinions. It's a different audience. Also, Trump's deal with Truth Social is coming to an end. Before he was removed from all mainstream social media, Twitter was his favorite platform. Twitter is also different now compared to before. Therefore, it is okay for him to come back to Twitter without looking like a loser compared to other platforms. He was kicked out of all these platforms. If he comes back, he'll just look like a loser, right? He'll not look like alpha. And what President Trump is really good at is looking alpha. Air quotes alpha. Air quotes looking alpha. You get what I'm saying. And at least with Twitter, he has that excuse that Twitter is now a different company compared to company compared to other social media companies. I think he'll just let his managers handle other social media and he'll come back on Twitter, most likely, after his Truth Social deal is over. Elon Musk has spent $44 billion on Twitter. He'll not switch to Threads for long term, although he might check it out. Elon Musk and Donald Trump will stick to Twitter. Those two are enough to keep Twitter in competition with its clones. Add to that Twitter being the brand and Threads being a knockoff, the future of Threads isn't looking good. This reminds me of Google's failed attempt to crush Facebook. Now some people might say Instagram crushed Snapchat. Well, Snapchat wasn't an established brand like a Twitter. It was a rising star. Instagram's UI and UX isn't as good now as it was back then. Instagram, Snapchat and TikTok combined. Plus it has that stupid algorithm that Facebook has, where you see content that you might like instead of content from people you're friends with or people you follow. You get what I'm saying? I think that algorithm made Facebook crash. Now, it might not how do I put this? Meta might not care because they have Facebook as almost 3 billion users. So Meta might not care, but most people cared. And that's why they have left Facebook. And they all say that Facebook is for old people and all that. The truth is, Facebook does not serve, or at least the news feed on Facebook app is not as good as it was back then. And that's why people left Facebook. And same is happening with Instagram now. Also, that's probably why Threads is a separate app based on Instagram account rather than just Instagram integration like stories or reels. Last time they did a separate app was IGTV. So different audience, Elon Musk, Donald Trump and Twitter brand, and also content algorithm are the reasons why Threads will become the new Google Plus. Most likely. Next story. PM Modi in France and UAE, Chandrayaan 3 to the moon. India launched Chandrayaan 3 for its lunar mission. It took off from Sriharikota on 14th July. India's previous mission in 2019 ended in failure after it attempted to land on moon. It failed in the last stage of mission due to software glitch. India discovered water on moon with its 2008 Chandrayaan 1. Chandrayaan 3 has an orbiter, a lander and a rover. If it's successful, India will be the fourth country to land on moon after USSR, USA and China. If the landing is successful, India will be the first country to land on the south pole of the moon. We'll know if India is successful around 23 of August. around 23 of August. That's around the BRICS summit of 2023. While Chandrayaan 3 was being launched, PM Modi was in France. He was there for the Bastille Day parade. Indian soldiers participated in parade. I was worried there will be some disruptions in the parade considering the protests that happened in France, but event happened without any disruptions. Here's everything announced in PM Modi's visit in France. Almost everything. Indian students pursuing master's degree in France will be given post-study visa of 5 years. India and France have agreed to use Unified Payments Interface (UPI) in France. India and France announced to procure 26 Rafale M fighters to operate off of the aircraft carriers and 3 additional Scorpion-class diesel submarines. PM Modi was awarded the Grand Cross of the Legion d'Honneur, France's highest civilian and military honor. He also received number 1, a framed facsimile of the photograph, a Parisian presenting flowers to a Sikh, 14th July 1916. Second, reproduction of the Charlemagne chessmen, 11th century. Third, Marcel Proust's Le Temps Retrouvé, Time Regained. Played plus English edition of La Recharge du Temps du Temps Perdu. I'm sorry, I don't speak French. I should have probably studied the proper pronunciations. In Search of Lost Time and Time Regained. After successfully completing Tour de France, PM Modi left for UAE. PM Modi met UAE President Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Let me say that again. PM Modi met UAE President Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Mohammed bin Zayed. Remember that name. MBZ. MBS and MBZ. Remember those two names. MBS, we all know Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. But also remember MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed. PM Modi tweeted he was grateful to the Crown Prince H.H. Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for welcoming him at the airport. They held key bilateral talks. India and UAE have agreed to settle trade in local currencies. IIT Delhi will set up a campus in Abu Dhabi. PM Modi arrived in Delhi after concluding his 2-nation visit to France and UAE. Okay, next story. Dalai Lama ready to talk to China. On his birthday, His Holiness Dalai Lama said, "I'm angry with no one, not even those Chinese leaders who have adopted a harsh attitude towards Tibet. China is changing and has now realized that the Tibetan people are very strong." Why? Audio says nothing is going. Audio is. I don't think the audio is catching the background noise. Okay. Thank God. So let me say that again. I'm angry with no one, not even those Chinese leaders who have adopted a harsh attitude towards Tibet. China is changing and has now realized that the Tibetan people are very strong, and in order to deal with Tibetan people, they want to have contact with me, and I am also ready. He told media persons at Kangra airport before leaving for Delhi. I am always open to talks with China and have made it clear years ago that we are not seeking complete independence would remain a part of People's Republic of China, PRC, the Dalai Lama added in response to a question. Dalai Lama also met with Ms. Zeya, who is the US Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights, and also the US Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issues. China protested the meeting, calling it an attempt to interfere in China's internal affairs. Dalai Lama going back to Tibet while it is under Chinese control will be a huge blow to India and USA, who dispute China's control over Tibet. China is also trying to install its own Dalai Lama to tighten its control over Tibet. So it will be interesting to see what happens with Dalai Lama. So next topic. This is something I've been doing. It's not in the news, and this is the topic of Google versus Microsoft ecosystem. So I've been going back and forth between Google and Microsoft ecosystems. Here's why. This is frustrating that I want an ecosystem experience of Apple, but I don't want restrictions of iPhone and iPad. If iPhone and iPad had the same levels of freedom as macOS, I'd love to be in the Apple ecosystem. Google ecosystem is good. Android, Google TV, Android TV, Google Nest speakers are great. But to complete the ecosystem, I have to switch to Chrome OS, Android tablet and Wear OS watches. Why? Microsoft ecosystem is also good. Windows and Xbox are good mostly. Windows tablets are okay-ish. But the problem is Microsoft doesn't have direct presence in mobile, smartwatches and smart speakers. They don't have platforms for those. So how do you pick these ecosystems? Well, I'd say switch to Microsoft for productivity, gaming and software development. Switch to Google for phones, TV and smart homes. Although recently, Google Assistant has had issues. Here's how Google can create their ecosystem. Put Chrome OS on tablets, but with ARM SoC instead of Intel Celeron processors. Launch desktop Linux operating system. Have local desktop apps with cross-platform sync instead of web apps. And call it Chrome OS Pro or Cyborg or something like that. Use your influence to put this operating system as default on laptops and pre-built desktops. Convince companies like Adobe, Autodesk to put their software on your platform. Remember, Steam mostly works on Linux desktop operating system. Steam works, but Windows games that are on Steam, most of them work on Linux operating systems. So Google can use that to their advantage for this Chrome OS Pro or Cyborg operating system. And basically they have to displace Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office mostly. If they do that, Google ecosystem will be a complete ecosystem like Apple has. Here's how Microsoft can create their ecosystem. Buy the Galaxy Store from Samsung and also put it on every Chinese manufacturer's phone. Chinese services aren't used outside of China and they cannot compete with Apple's world-class services in China. But Microsoft can. Microsoft, unlike Google, operates in China. All Microsoft has to do is keep this new Microsoft Galaxy Store alive until Google eventually kills Google Play Store. They probably will at some point. They can also update Cortana by integrating Bing Chat into Cortana and join the Matter Alliance to increase smart home hardware support. And just put out a smart speaker with Cortana and the new Cortana that has the Bing Chat and Matter integration. Of course, it's easier for Google to create an ecosystem than Microsoft outside of China. Most people use Google services. Google Search, Chrome, Maps, YouTube, Gmail, Google Drive over their Microsoft equivalents. What Google has failed is to convince most of the world to switch to G Suite or Google Workspace over Microsoft Office and Microsoft 365. And Google hasn't made a proper desktop operating system that competes with Microsoft Windows and Apple macOS. Google also failed in high-end gaming with Stadia. Again, they went with the cloud instead of desktop. People are rejecting cloud and in favor of local. At this point, Google needs to go to people instead of waiting for people to come to them. But Google may not want to replace Microsoft completely, as it would make Google more powerful today than Microsoft of 90s in computing. This will only increase regulatory scrutiny against Google far more. So we are stuck with this fragmented experience with Google and Microsoft ecosystems. Microsoft and Sony signed a deal to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. This just came in last night. Microsoft and Sony have signed a deal to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer tweeted, "We are pleased to announce Microsoft and PlayStation have signed a binding agreement to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation following the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. We look forward to a future where players globally have more choice to play their favorite games." After a lot of opposition in courts, Sony and Microsoft will work together on Call of Duty issues. Microsoft has confirmed that the duration of this deal with Sony is for 10 years. This is just like the deals Microsoft has signed with Nintendo, Nvidia and others. It would have come to this sooner or later, because it doesn't make sense to pull a big franchise like Call of Duty that wants to dominate online multiplayer platform pull it away from Sony. Almost all regulatory authorities have cleared the deal. US FTC will now be forced to clear the deal. Only place that remains is UK's CMA. In fact, after EU cleared the deal, it was pretty clear that no regulatory authority in the world would object to this deal, at least without looking stupid. FTC and CMA have done that. FTC is now looking incompetent, and so is CMA. I wonder if all Bethesda games and Activision Blizzard King games are going to be available on Xbox Game Pass. I wonder what happens to the games section of Microsoft Store on Windows. Will it finally be competitive with Steam? Of course, the biggest question is, what are Microsoft plans with mobile gaming exactly? Well, the only way we can find out is to wait. Now what else? I want to talk about the BRICS currency. This is coming in August, according to rumors. It is obvious that United States wants to maintain its hegemony, and it launches this warfare with proxy wars against major competitors like Russia and China. What it will do is that it will launch proxy wars. It will impose sanctions on those countries. So where is United States strength lies? What is the strength of United States right now? Number one, finance and economy. Strength, US economy is not strong right now, but what is US competitive advantage is finance and technology. And number three is navy. These three advantages. Now, if Russia and China want to continue their rise to power, they need to protect themselves against American sanctions via finance and technology. The sanctions that America imposes through finance and technology. And the biggest way US does that is through the US dollar. So if Russia and China want to continue their rise, they must turn the tide against US dollar. They must get rid of US dollar as a reserve currency, as a global reserve currency. And how do you get rid of US dollar? You just cannot do that without offering something better, a better alternative to most of the countries. And the only way to do that is through the gold standard, a currency based on the gold standard. And I think that's what Russia and China are going to try. They'll introduce another currency, and that is based on gold standard and possibly also on other commodities. What US does, it exports its inflation all over the world via its currency. Whether it's just devaluation of currency through just endless printing, or quantitative easing, or what it also does is it can also do that via raising the interest rates, which will devalue other currencies compared to dollar by making the dollar stronger. So we have to see what happens in this BRICS summit. Also, in the BRICS summit, Macron was rejected. Macron asked to be invited, to be the first country to be invited to this BRICS summit, but he was rejected. You know who has been invited? Almost all of the African nations. Yes, South Africa is the host of the BRICS summit, and South Africa has invited almost all of Africa. It's looking rough for US dollar. US dollar will probably come to an end as a reserve currency in this decade or the early 2030s. And all that remains is technology. China is expert in that. All China has to do is hack and then reverse engineer US technologies. China has been doing that, by the way, and they'll continue to do that. But without an industrial base, because it was shipped to China, US and European economy is just based on finance. And if the financial power is gone, the technological power is gone, what's left? At least US is an autarky. US is food independent, US is energy independent. It can become energy independent. I think right now it's not. Under Biden administration, under Trump administration, it became energy independent. Under Biden administration, I don't think it is. But it can become energy independent once more. And at least US has a better chance of surviving the post-de-dollarization world. But even US is deeply divided amongst itself. That makes it harder. But I think US will bring back manufacturing. It's not looking good for Europe. At least US can just re-industrialize. US is rich in natural resources, quite rich. It's richer than China. It's not as rich as Russia when it comes to natural resources, but I think it's richer than almost the entire world. Not combined, but it's richer than the entire world. And I think they'll restart their industrial economy, and US will become great power in late 30s, early 40s, or at least let's be generous, late 30s to late 40s. United States will emerge as a great power once again. Right now it's going downhill. And once dollar is gone as a reserve currency, once de-dollarization accelerates, it's already accelerated, but if de-dollarization just completely takes off, then US power will fade. So it will be this decade is a decade of major geopolitical upheaval, and it's going to be an interesting decade. If you are European, you possibly have the worst decade right now. If you are American, if you are Indian, you probably have a great decade. American will go down a little bit and it will come back up. India, you probably have a great decade ahead of you. China also probably have a great decade, but China's demographics are bad, that therefore it is hard to bet on China long term. You can bet on China in short and to medium term, but not long term. In India, on India and on United States, you can bet long term. United States is not looking good short to medium term. Russia also not looking good long term. But at least Russia has resources. Russia can become self-sufficient. Also, I mean, it already is self-sufficient. But even if world moves away from hydrocarbon-based transportation and energy production, Russia can become and can stay as a great power, because Russia has a lot of natural resources that can provide them with nuclear energy, and they can also be a great solar power if they want to be. They probably will stick to nuclear and eventually transition to solar. But if you are European, it's not looking good for you. Not looking good. So it will be interesting to see what happens at the BRICS summit in August 2023. And I guess we'll end it there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys very, very soon.